Hello and welcome back to Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir. I'm Tim Willoughby with Randy Bueller, who has managed to magically transport himself straight from the news desk into the booth because it sounds like a sad thing, but it's really not. Draft is over for the day. We're now at a point where Standard is the big thing, and you did your preview earlier on in the day. You recorded that about the key cards in Standard. Having seen some of the deck lists, would you say you're more or less excited about Standard now?
More. There is some crazy stuff going on. Yeah, I recorded that piece, spent a lot of time this morning just kind of thumbing through the deck list, checking out who's playing what, and wow, there are some great decks. I mean, the top 20, I felt decent about the way that came together. I might have overrated Sidisi Undead Vizier. Secure the Waste probably should have been ranked rather than honorable mention. But I mean, that gave you a decent overview of what's going on. There's lots of people playing dragons. There's some other crazy decks too. I mean, wow. Yeah,
no spoilers
I'm super
for now,
excited.
but there's going to be some good
feature
stuff.
match area. There's going to be some great stuff. Some absolutely just some out of left field decks that I don't think anybody was expecting superstar players to show up with. So we got some surprises in store for today for sure.
And of course, speaking of feature match areas, we do have our pairings for the feature matches for the next round, and there's some star talent in this feature match area this round. Starting on our video match, we're going to have Pro Tour Magic 2015 with Ivan Floch up against Shi Tian. A few sort of big names of the game, both top 5 players at the moment. Ivan Floch, number 4, Shi Tian, number 2 on the planet. Then we've got, on our King of the Hill table, Patrick Chapin, unstoppable thus far, up against Matthew Norton from the USA. Potentially a tough matchup for Norton there. Then we have an interesting one on table C. We have Thiago Saporito from Brazil, and he's up against Tetsuro Itodani from Japan. Now, Tetsuro, an interesting player, not had most of his success in Magic the Gathering. This is a guy who, at 17 years of age, started on the competitive shogi scene, shogi being Japanese chess. He recently earned the title of Dragon Master, which is basically the highest accolade possible in shogi. The Dragon King, he is absolutely unstoppable at shogi, clearly one of the great strategic minds in gaming.
That Dragon King title in Japan, that came with $400,000.
Crikey,
like 40 million yen, but yeah.
That's like 10 Pro Tours.
It's insane. Yeah, this is, like you say, one of the great strategic gaming minds in Japan right now.
Yeah, and he's here. He's playing in the Pro Tour. We're not quite clear on exactly how much experience he has compared to some of our Pro Tour players, but it's very, very hard to discount someone that just has that level of high-level strategic thinking. Finally, though, another big name from Japan, Makihito Mahara. He's back in the feature match area with his Hall of Fame ring, and he's up against Pro Tour winner and Pro Tour finalist Sean McLaren from Canada. So 4 really great matches in the feature match area, and we'll get a chance to find out how much they've chosen to use from these Dragons of Tarkir releases.
Yeah, though, it's some great matchups. I mean, 2 of the top 5 players in the game right now in the rankings sitting in the video feature match. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, you cannot win a Pro Tour without getting past the best players in the game. And for Ivan Floch and Shi Tian, they're finding out about that sooner than some.
Yeah, they're 3-0 at this point, right? Yeah, 3-0 each.
Both Shi Tian and Ivan Floch 3-0. Matthew Norton and Patrick Chapin obviously also 3-0. Both won their draft pods. And when Chapin wins his draft pod, you have to worry because I still think of him as principally a constructed player. He's got a very, very strong deck building mentality and indeed play style. And yeah, I wouldn't want to say that he's going to lose that seat anytime soon.
Absolutely fair. Yeah, Shi Tian is also a guy who he's leading the Player of the Year race right now. I mean, he's been just on this awesome run, putting up top 8s. Yeah. If he actually puts up a top 8 here, if he stays hot,
catchable?
I mean, well, right now, sure, there's 4 guys that I believe have cleared the 50-point mark, but it feels like if any of those guys in the top half dozen or so puts up another top 8, they get to the point where, only a couple people can catch them, and only if they make a deep run at the last Pro Tour.
And I guess one of the interesting things is, as much as we've got a brand new set, and it is a brand new big set, this is a standard format with a lot of cards that people are used to. People have been able to fall into kind of some roles where they're comfortable with particular decks. So we know that there's players with pedigree that are playing at this Pro Tour and doing well. They could very easily be running updates on something they're already very, very strong with.
And we don't have all the deck lists, but we do have Shi Tian and Ivan Floch's deck list. Shi Tian, he's going to run back a specialty of his. Jeskai Ascendancy Combo.
Wow. Now, that's one we've seen him have a huge amount of success with. He's got a Pro Tour top 8 with that deck already. He's a very, very crisp play. He played it at the World Championship as well. So very hard to say that he's not going to be in good spot there. Now, Ivan Floch, I know that he's a big one for playing control decks where he can. Not necessarily sure that blue-black control is a deck that we've seen too much out of in the last set or two. Is that something he can do here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he can. What is he actually running? Oh, he's going to go Sidisi Whip. But yeah, you can play blue-black control in this format. I think that Silumgar Scorn it's actually a really good counterspell. It looks like a Force Spike. It looks like, why am I paying 2 mana for a Force Spike? But in the early turns of the game, you're willing to pay 2 mana for a Force Spike because your opponent is going to be curving out. They're just going to keep tapping out. So you're going to get to counter something for 2 mana. And that's if you don't have a dragon. Obviously, that's the worst case scenario. If you do have a dragon, you just have actual counterspell. So I do think blue-black control is viable. I think Silumgar Scorn's a nice counter. I think Ultimate Price fills in the removal suite really nicely. And then you've got a couple of Dragon Lords to choose from as well between Silumgar and Ojutai, either of whom could be good. I mean, if you go white enough, you can even get Narset Transcendent in there. So I do expect to see some people, somewhere in the sort of Esper-colored control suite, even if it's not necessarily Ivan.
Yeah, there's a lot of players that I know have been trying to piece that puzzle together. They've got the corners and the edges. Right. They're just trying to figure out all the bits of sky to be able to finally piece together the right answer in the format.
Part of the problem with a control deck is you really want to know what the threats are that you're expected to answer. And the field is so wide open right now that I think it's hard to figure out exactly what tools you want to show up with your control deck. I think that, control may be something you see more of 2 weeks from now, a month from now, than you actually see today. The other card control gets, I noticed this because Shi Tian also gets it for his combo deck, is Anticipate.
Ooh, yeah. More card drawing, more card selection. Very important for a combo deck, but control certainly doesn't mind that either, right?
It's good for the control deck. It's exactly what Shi Tian wants. It's, I think, the only Dragons card in this list. I'm looking through his Jeskai Ascendancy combo list. A couple Anticipates. Looks like the one new addition. It's also good for the Jeskai Tokens deck.
Oh, wow, yeah. More spells that just do things.
Instant speed, untap my team, loot with the Ascendancy, find the treasure cruise or whatever. Yeah,
it turns out that Impulse was good enough that even if you change the numbers on it a little bit, it's still very, very powerful.
Yeah, Floch looks like he's got Sidisi Undead Vizier as the new addition. So he's playing the Sidisi Whip deck, Satyr Wayfinders to fill the yard. He's got the Coursers, 4 of the Brood Tyrant version of Sidisi, a couple Tassigers, a couple Torrent Elementals. Kind of what you would expect. I mean, I'm genuinely curious to find out how good the Whip of Erebos decks are. I feel like they're not as good. I feel like...
It seems to me like there's potential to be aggressive in this format, right?
And I also think Dromoka's Command just makes all of your enchantments a lot more fragile. I think it's just a little more fragile than it used to be. But that's what Ivan's going to be taking into battle with in this round.
Well, enough of us talking about it. Let's go down to the feature match area and see it as we go into round 4 here at Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir. Dragons of Tarkir. I'm Tim Willoughby here with Hall of Famer Randy Buehler, and we're going to launch straight into our feature match. On the left of our screen, we have Ivan Floch. He's up against Shi Tian, who you see there just preparing himself for the first turn of the game. Ivan on Sidisi Whip, a list that has sort of been gradually been perfected over the last few months in this format. And now we have, on the other side of the screen, Shi Tian playing Jeskai Ascendancy Combo. A first turn Temple of Mystery there from Ivan Floch, just getting a bit of a scry in. Not too much information given away there because a lot of different decks running Scrylands in this format. Certainly we see there another one from Shi Tian.
2 great players. Both have been putting up multiple super results in the last year or so. Be interested to see. Sort of a great place to start as we explore this pretty new standard.
And Shi Tian there with 2 copies of Sylvan Caryatid in hand. And that one of those cards that if a deck could play more than 4 copies of a particular card, I'm pretty sure that Shi Tian would be fine with having a couple of extra Sylvan Caryatids. It sorts out your mana, it makes sure that you have creatures to untap with your Ascendancy. It's really one of the key cards for this combo deck. And actually, as it turns out, one that's good enough that Ivan Floch wants to play it as well there in his Sidisi Whip deck. Neither of these players are going to get stuck on small amounts of mana in these games.
Yeah, we've seen some of the Caryatid decks have been shying away from it. Like, it's been coming out of green decks in general. Not going to come out of this combo deck, though.
Jeskai Ascendancy coming down on turn 3 for Shi Tian. At this point, he's so associated with his deck that it's really not worth his while trying to use any gamesmanship, perhaps, to make it unclear what he's playing. He just wants to get down the powerful enchantment, and potentially he can do an awful lot just off that board. He missed a land drop, but with his key enchantment in play and a creature to untap, he can do an awful lot from here.
It's a pretty good matchup for him, too. There's not a lot of ways for Floch to interact with him. I mean, with Caryatid as the creature, that hexproof ability means even the removal spells aren't super relevant to what Shi Tian's up to.
And we know that there's another Sylvan Caryatid in Shi Tian's hand. So the mana issues that he might be having, not the biggest worry for him, because as much as anything else, every non-creature spell that he casts means he gets to draw and discard a card. Sooner or later, he'll find the lands he needs.
All right, well, here's one of the keys to Ivan's deck. Like, he is setting up. He's got to implement his game plan. I think he knows that his game plan is just not as fast as Shi Tian, so he's got to... But he's going to implement it as well as he can, play the Brood Tyrant, start filling up the graveyard, trying to generate attackers, although he actually whiffed with that Sidisi and did not get a zombie.
Yeah, 2 lands and a hero's downfall going into Ivan Floch's graveyard there.
Oh, wow. Shi Tian's already got it. He just showed Ivan that he's got both the Dragon Mantle and the Retraction Helix. You know, he essentially said, I've got you, and Ivan said, show me. Ivan wants to make him go through the motions. I think this is Ivan trying to make sure that he understands exactly how this deck works.
Conveniently showing it for the rest of us also. So basically what's happening here, there's a little bit of shortcutting going on. Shi Tian is able to tap and untap his Sylvan Caryatid by casting and recasting Dragon Mantle, because he has Retraction Helix to allow him to bounce that Dragon Mantle as and when he needs to by tapping using one of his untapped triggers from those 2 Jeskai Ascendancies. Now, with the way things stand on the board, Shi Tian doesn't actually have the kill. He's got 1 creature, it's a defender. It is getting much, much bigger with each one of these Jeskai Ascendancy triggers, but that alone will not be enough to win him the game. He is going to need to have either a way of decking Ivan Floch or potentially a creature to attack with, but because he has Twin Flame in his deck, one thing he is able to do is cast any creature, doesn't really matter which one, as long as it can attack. He can then Twin Flame it to make a token that has haste. And then if you cast enough spells, like for example that Dragon Mantle, sooner or later you end up saying, I've got a gigantic attacker. And actually, even in the face of Sidisi, he can just say, I'm just going to make multiple gigantic attackers, and sooner or later you're going to be dead.
And you see Lee's just drawing cards. You talked about how they're shortcutting here. Lee has demonstrated a loop where he's able to pick up and recast the Dragon Mantle without actually changing the state of his board, so the players have agreed, yeah, you can just do that as many times as you want. Shi Tian is just going to keep drawing through his deck until he finds what he needs.
Yeah, worth noting that the Jeskai Ascendancy draw and discard is not mandatory, so basically Shi Tian is only using the draw off the Dragon Mantle, not off the Jeskai Ascendancy.
And he found Astral Cornucopia, which means he can turn a profit every time through the loop now. He found Altar of the Brood, which means he can deck Ivan Floch. And Ivan Floch's not interested in showing Lee all the cards in his deck. He's like, yeah, you got me.
So, as it turns out, that was not the fastest game that's happened in our feature match area. Seems hard to believe, but it's true. Patrick Chapin already a game up against Matthew Norton over on the King of the Hill table. There's very little chance that Patrick Chapin wants to give up that table at any point this weekend, because if you never give up that table, you win the Pro Tour.
It's a good plan. Sounds like we're going to throw to a quick commercial, and we'll be right back with more coverage of round 4.
Outfit your Magic collection with the newest Dragons of Tarkir accessories from Ultra Pro. You can see the full array of card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and portfolios of your favorite Magic artwork at ultrapro.com. Tarkir in the spring. Spring has sprung and the Mardu Rough Riders are traipsing past the Nomad Outposts in the latest 20-card pack for Duels of the Planeswalkers. These all-foil cards will amp up your 3-color decks and help you conquer the plane of Tarkir. Visit magic.wizards.com/duels for more information.
Welcome back to round 4 of Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir. We're going to have a quick live look in on one of our other tables. Makahito Mahara, playing Black-Green Constellation, is up against Sean McLaren from Canada. And while the whole match will be visible on the website as a text piece of coverage, we see here a duress from Sean McLaren, revealing quite the hand here from Makahito Mahara. A lot of options available to McLaren here. There is the Whip of Erebos that's potentially very, very powerful, but also an Eidolon of Blossoms, also Nissa Worldwaker. There's a huge amount of power in this hand that Sean McLaren can go for. He can't hit a creature, but See the Unwritten, Nissa, and Whip of Erebos, all perfectly reasonable cards to take here.
Meanwhile, it sounds like Tetsuro Ichidani, our Dragon King, is up a game in his match against Thiago Saporito.
Yeah, Saporito, one of the hot players from Brazil, definitely someone to watch out for in future. He has got a Pro Tour top 8 at Pro Tour Khans of Tarkir. It seems like thus far the Dragon's not suiting him quite so well as the Khans. And Nissa, World Wake of the choice there for Sean McLaren, who, in a relatively sort of controlling version of Abzan here, we can see an End Hostilities in his hand there, along with a few other cards in order to be able to sort of eke out an advantage. He's not necessarily interested in attacking with 2 drops. He wants to make sure that he wins the long game. And Corsa Krufix there, revealing Elvish Mystic on the top for Makihito Mahara. I'm pretty sure that Mahara would prefer to have seen a land there. He is a little bit light on mana production, and that Elvish Mystic may prove to be a little bit slow. Also, it does rather die to that End Hostilities in Sean McLaren's hand. Now, McLaren here, he has 2 copies of Utter End, so he's able to sit back if he wants to, but he actually says, I know that you're going to be drawing an Elvish Mystic next turn. I can afford to just get rid of that Corsair now, because what I don't want to see is a land on top of your deck and you potentially getting out of trouble faster. There is a land on the top of Sean McLaren's deck. He's obviously quite happy to hit lands as long as the game goes on, because as a control deck, he almost certainly has ways to leverage them. Casts Corsa Krufix. Unlikely he's going to want to crack that fetch land anytime soon, because Elspeth Sun's Champion on the top of the deck there is going to mean that Makihito Mahara may not be long for this world.
Jeez.
Utter End there just to reinforce the mana issues of Makihito Mahara. And Corsa Krufix gives him another roll of the dice to see if he can find a land, but it is not a land. That is Sylvan Caryatid. And while it is a mana producer, again, it may just prove to be a little bit on the slow side now that Sean McLaren has both lands and spells, and Makihito Mahara can see what trouble is coming his way thanks to the Corsa Krufix in play for the Canadian. This is a notable change for Sean McLaren. We kind of associate him with playing Jeskai decks of various different descriptions, but I guess that he has always been associated with control, and in that respect, nothing has changed here, even if his weapons of choice have undertaken a little bit of a paint job. Making 3 tokens there, soldier tokens from the Elspeth Sun's Champion, and a Pelukrinos on the top of the deck for Makihito Mahara. Might have been good had he had the lands earlier on, but here he may find that it's too little too late, and certainly doesn't match up particularly well against that Elspeth.
Yeah, he really wanted to land there. I know that Sean actually paused on his turn. Elspeth's obviously a great play, but he was tempted, I think, by Utter End targeting Corsair. Try to keep Mahara pinned on lands as long as he could. Went ahead and elected to spend his mana on Elspeth instead. No land on top of Mahara's library, so that Utter End remains an option.
And here we see one of the nice interactions between fetch lands and Corsa Krufix. Sean McLaren can see what's on the top of his deck. If he decides that he doesn't like it and he's got a fetch land available, he can just crack it, fetch a new land, shuffle up his deck and say, well, maybe the next draw will be a little bit better for me. Meanwhile, plenty of shuffling going on in our main match there. Floch and Shi Tian both preparing themselves for game 2, as Shi Tian 1 game up, looking to finish things off with his combo deck. Now, Makihito Mahara is actually someone who's got quite a bit of experience with Green-Black. I believe that right back as far as Pro Tour Theros, the first opportunity to be in Green-Black Devotion, he's been on Devotion for a long time, and Green-Black also. So we see, again, players typically going with their strengths. I mean, Sean McLaren, a notable exception to that, I suppose. Abzan Charm here. On 17 life, Sean McLaren says, yes, I think I could afford to pay 2 to draw a couple of cards. He gets, of course, a Krufix and another land there, a case of Kolos. We just need to get him to flip the top card of his deck. Thanks for pointing there, Makihito. And End Hostilities. On the face of things, you'd say, well, it's not necessarily going to be that useful to Sean McLaren, but given that he's got a Planeswalker in play, he doesn't really mind too much if he did have to pull the trigger on wiping the board, because he is up lots of lands and a big Planeswalker.
Not clear he's going to need to pull the trigger. Elspeth is certainly threatening to go ultimate relatively soon and send those soldiers over for lethal.
Yeah, a wholly different kind of trigger to pull, I suppose. Their Eidolon of Blossoms coming down from Akihito Mahara. He has got plenty of enchantments in his deck, so in principle there's the potential to get a draw engine going here. But in practice, I think that he may well find that getting that engine started in time to get up to speed is not really going to work out for him.
Yeah, he's losing this game on multiple axes right now. But on the one hand, Elspeth is single-handedly threatening to kill him in a couple of turns. And on the other hand, the biggest enemy, the thing you least want to face when you're running one of these constellation decks, the Eidolon constellation decks in particular, is end hostilities. Right? Your card advantage comes in the form of just spilling out a bunch of 2/2s and 2/4s onto the table. So when the opponent can undo all of that card advantage all at once, it's losing on two angles.
And here we see there is that end hostilities. After blocks there, he gets in the damage where he can. Kind of the classic move, attack with everybody and then cast your Wrath of God effect. Several loyalty now on Elspeth as she makes 3 more soldier tokens for Sean McLaren. And we're not in the cleanup phase, but we are in the cleanup stage of this game. Getting a life there from the Caves of Kolos. And knowing that Makihito Mahara was going to be drawing just a course of Crucifix was kind of enough for Sean McLaren to know exactly how safe he was on wrapping the game there. And we get a chance to go back to our main match. That one now complete. And just starting, we have Ivan Floch versus Shi Tian. Floch just activating a polluted delta there to search up a basic land, either a swamp or an island, up against the first turn play of a Frontier Bivouac from Shi Tian. Now, one card that potentially might be in the list for Floch here in the sideboard, Duress is a card that's been talked about being added to quite a few sideboards, and now it's back available in Standard. Thoughtseize potentially painful for some decks. It doesn't look like that's one that is being used by Ivan Floch in this situation, but he does have the likes of Ugin the Spirit Dragon and so on. If he can get the mana up to cast it, then he can just sort of stop things entirely. Thoughtseize, a main deck choice though, and he's got 4 good options here.
Yeah,
Can't
no
take any of
duress,
those lands.
The Thoughtseize is quite good.
Now, an interesting collection here. None of the real power cards from the deck, but all sort of pieces of the puzzle, I suppose. There's a Voyaging Satyr that can untap lands, make life a little bit easier for Shi Tian to be able to go
and can
off.
serve as a combo creature in place of the Carry Added.
There's a Swan Song, typically used in this combo deck in order to protect the combo rather than stop opponents from doing things, but occasionally it will do that too. Astral Cornucopia, which, while in principle it might look like mana fixing, in fact, the thing it does most often is act as a 0-cost spell that you can make a permanent that can then be picked up and played many, many times. And finally, Commune with the Gods. That a great way of finding the key pieces that you need.
And as you say, the one you described as a great way to find the pieces, that's the one that Ivan takes with Thoughtseize.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that in general, Shi Tian's hand there was a particularly devastating hand. It needs work, and Commune with the Gods was the thing that was going to really put in work there. Floch there with 2 Murderous Cut and Tasiga the Golden Fang. So he will have been very happy to see that the mana-producing creatures in Shi Tian's hand were not Sylvan Caryatid this time round. Any other creature that can tap to effectively produce mana is far, far more vulnerable in terms of going off with this deck. And with 2 copies of Murderous Cut and already a couple of cards in the graveyard, it's not going to be very difficult for Ivan Floch to get to a point where he can keep the potentially 1 mana up that he needs to just keep Shi Tian away from the combo.
Yeah, you can keep him away for a little while though, but where's the pressure, right? There's nothing forcing Shi Tian to go for it. He's going to have the turns that he needs to try to sculpt the perfect hand. I mean, I'm thinking about this deck choice from Lee, and if people are playing a bunch of Sidisi Whip style decks like the one Ivan Floch is playing, Ascendancy Combo could be a really good call for this tournament.
I mean, that's kind of the decision point that he was at for the World Championship at the end of last year. Sidisi Whip was certainly one of the big players then. I mean, we saw Shahar Shenhar playing it to his world title. And at that point, Shi Tian played this deck. I mean, I would say he's got more experience than just about anyone on the planet
for sure.
with this deck.
Yeah,
certainly at high level.
I just feel like it's proven itself to not quite be tier 1. It's like a tier 1.5, maybe tier 2 deck that has some really good matchups. I'm not sure it's great against the red aggro decks that are fueled by Dragons of Tarkir. I'm not sure it's great against the red-green decks that are fueled by Dragons either, although, I mean, a Tarka isn't exactly the fastest card to kill someone with.
Absolutely.
fast after it gets into play, but it costs 7 mana, so maybe he does get the turns that he needs against the red-green decks to actually set up shop. Here, though, I asked where the pressure was coming from. Ivan Floch actually answered my question quite nicely. Pressure's coming from Tarkir.
Yeah, Tarkir sometimes is just a 4/5 for a trifling amount of mana. And immediately swinging in.
Shi Tian drew the Caryatid, but led with the information that Ivan Floch already had.
Yeah, I mean, one of the powerful things about any combo deck like this is just the fact that at some point it can just get you. And having more hidden information is just a good thing to have when you're playing a combo deck, just assuming that there's not a huge amount of difference between what you're going to play.
I mean, what he does still need to find, though, is the Jeskai's Ascendancy.
Yeah, without Jeskai Ascendancy, his deck is not really a deck. It has some mana producing, it has some card drawing, but those things on their own are not going to win the game. Not having a Jeskai Ascendancy in play ultimately makes his life very difficult. And speaking of ultimate price there, dealing with Voyaging Satyr, and meaning that Tarkir is just the one lone non-land permanent in play, and quite a powerful one at that. So speaking of Shi Tian trying to sculpt a hand here, he's taking his time figuring out exactly what he wants to do. Plays the Sylvan Caryatid, so in Ivan Floch's head, that's sort of one tick of a card that I don't need to think about what that blank was in your hand previously. It's now resolved itself into a Sylvan Caryatid. Very, very, very unlikely to block anytime soon, that 0/3 defender.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what Shi Tian needs is Jeskai Ascendancy. I mean, also really wants a Retraction Helix. If he finds those 2 cards, he's fine. But without those cards, his deck doesn't do anything.
Quick score update from the back table. Patrick Chapin has already emerged victorious against Matthew Norton from the USA. Patrick, on an Abzan deck, seems to have just been able to, he's right in his comfort zone, both in terms of being in the feature match area and playing a deck that he's clearly very, very competent with indeed. So a Satyr Wayfinder there potentially for Ivan Floch. Always the temptation, though, just to hold up more mana. He's got both those Murderous Cuts and a Disdainful Stroke. Now, what can Disdainful Stroke really hit in this matchup?
I was a little bit surprised that this came in, actually.
It seems to me that most of the most important cards in the matchup cost very, very little for Shi Tian to cast.
He can hit Dig Through Time.
I mean, that's a pretty good one to hit, but it's not actually one that there's a full 4 of in Shi Tian's deck. That's something that previous iterations have been heavier on big delve spells than this current one. I guess anticipate filling some of that void while being comparatively mana efficient also.
At some level, though, I mean, Ivan probably didn't have Ascendancy Combo in mind when he put his list together. Probably has just a lot more creature removal in the main deck than he wants in this matchup.
And that kind of feeds into what you were saying before the match started about how difficult it is to build a control deck in this format, because there's so many different decks that just seem to do very, very powerful things, but not necessarily working on remotely the same axis. Murderous Cut there, aimed at Voyaging Satyr, and the reason that Ivan Floch's kind of holding it mid-air is that there could be a swan song here to keep the Voyaging Satyr around. It's unclear whether or not Shi Tian really needs to do that, but certainly worth at least not rushing through your turns. But there is the Swan Song, so that means that there will be a 2/2 bird token for Ivan Floch. They're just double checking to make sure they get exactly the right bird token. There's been various birds in Standard recently as tokens. The Enchantment 2/2 birds in addition to regular 2/2s. We have an update from one of the other back tables. Tetsuro Itadani is now 2-0 against Tiago Saporito. He picks up his first win of the tournament. Congratulations to the Dragon King, showing that in Dragons of Tarkir Standard, he's got what it takes to get his first win on the board and hopefully continue a good run in Standard.
What was the name of the Japanese chess that he plays?
Shoji.
Shoji.
It's a tricky one. I technically know the rules, but I would hesitate to say that I can play.
Well, I know the rules here. Jeskai Ascendancy off the top. That was called a top deck.
Sometimes you'll get them. And this is certainly a high variance deck in terms of how your top decking tends to go.
Yeah, and now here's Astral Cornucopia, just mostly to trigger the Ascendancy. If he can come up with Retraction Helix, he's got it.
Well,
Came up with Dragon Mantle.
Dragon Mantle is a lot of card draw at this point. I mean, effectively, it's kind of a 1-mana ritual / divination.
Yeah, I mean, he'll get to draw a card because Dragon Mantle says draw a card. He'll also get to loot once off the Ascendancy. And he turned a profit of 1 mana while casting it. That is a Rattleclaw Mystic. That doesn't do anything. Here's the extra draw. What about this one?
It's a Swan Song.
Swan Song.
So this isn't exactly going off, but look how much better Li Shiqian's board looks now than it did just 1 turn ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's 1 Retraction Helix away from winning the game. If he finds Retraction Helix, then he goes infinite.
And having that Dragon Mantle on Sylvan Caryatid, really probably safer than even having it in his hand. This way it's not going to get hit by discard.
True.
Only enchantment removal is going to get rid of it because you cannot target that Sylvan Caryatid. Retraction Helix there, a key part of the combo, lets one of your creatures tap to bounce a permanent. Now, when it's so easy to engineer untaps and indeed to get permanents into play virtually for free, the missing piece of the puzzle is being able to bounce permanents to replay them again. So if that comes along, then I think it's safe to say that Li Shiqian is going to be putting a tick in the winners column for this match. In the meantime, though, 8 life, not loads to work with here, especially now there's a bird token able to fly over and get damage in, even if Li Shiqian is forced to block on the ground. Satyr Wayfinder finds a land, puts a few creatures into the graveyard, and in the meantime, on the back table, Sean McLaren picks up his win, 2-0 over Makihito Mahara. That a relatively quick one. So actually, almost all of our feature match area kind of clearing out now. We've got sort of matches falling left, right, and center. This does not appear, at least based on our feature match area, to be a particularly slow format.
I mean, these aren't even the beatdown decks. We know there's a bunch of red decks out there which did not.
Always kind of scary when you've got a combo player who's quite sort of careful, meticulous, potentially a little bit on the slow side in terms of how they play, because is it that they're trying to work out if they've got you dead right now? In this case, it's, do I need to be using Swan Song right now?
Yeah, that Murderous Cut is going to get countered by Swan Song.
It is a lot easier to do all sorts of clever things with this deck when you have 2 mana creatures in play rather than 1. Also, by casting this Swan Song, effectively, Li Shiqian is digging for the final piece of his combo. He gets to draw a card.
Yeah, I think he was happy to have something productive to point that at. He just wanted the loot. Also, the Murderous Cut leaves the Satyr available as a blocker, which is it time? I mean, if he just takes 6, then he's dead next turn. If he blocks Tasigur, he can at least potentially get 2 turns, maybe. Yeah, he says between all the Wayfinders are also going to come over. He decided he didn't think he could get another turn. Basically, all comes down to this next turn for Li Shiqian.
And this is kind of the way that...
top of the deck. Puts it in the back of his hand. He's going to slow roll everyone, himself included, but...
That's the fastest slow roll I've seen from Li Shiqian, and I've watched him play this deck an awful lot. As a spotter stood behind Li Shiqian while he's trying to work out what his outs are, if he can draw it on the last turn, he's definitely slow rolled me for, it feels like minutes before he actually draws his card on the critical turns.
What did he draw? Reviving Melody?
Now that is an interesting one there in addition to this deck. Not one that we've seen previously from Theros, this one. Choose one or both, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, and or return target enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Very cool piece of tech for this deck.
Yeah,
but not one that I saw coming, and it's a one-of in Li Shiqian's sideboard.
The loot did not save him, could not find the Retraction Helix. He found the Ascendancy, he had a bunch of turns, but Tasigur basically got the job done. Turn 3 Tasigur was able to outrace Li Shiqian's ability to stitch everything together.
Now, we will be going to a third game on this, just so you can see this is the last match in our feature match area. All the other matches have completed. There was a mulligan or so at the start of this one, so we did start a little bit later on this match than the other matches in the feature match area. But, I mean, one of the interesting things that I think came up during that game is just around the fact that when you're playing a combo deck, a lot of it does come to calculating how many turns do I have, and do I need to go for it yet? Have I got time to go for it? Sort of sequencing it out potentially a number of turns ahead just so that you can go off at the right point just before you die.
Yeah, definitely a tricky calculus there with Shi Tian trying to figure out, all right, if I block with my Voyaging Satyr, I won't have the ability to turn a profit on mana as I loot through, but maybe I can buy another turn, but maybe not because of the Wayfinders. Basically decided he wanted to keep the Wayfinder and he only gave himself the one turn, couldn't get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tricky one because you do get a lot more flexibility in going off if you have more mana creatures in play. Also, by having a creature in play that can get pumped, he could potentially just sort of raw dog his way to going off without fully going off, just by chaining enough spells together to make his Voyaging Satyr big enough just to simply attack. Now, the tricky bit there is sort of you need the extra mana for things like Anticipate. You don't want to have to actually pay 3. You want to kind of profit a little bit on that to be able to cast it for a little less, work your way up to it. And in that case, yeah, Shi Tian not quite able to find it. But I think that's one of the things you just have to take as read when you play this deck, is that sometimes it won't pan out. And that won't be down to everything your opponent does. It'll simply be that you haven't drawn your spells in quite the right order to be able to do it fast enough.
Does not look like our dragon counter is going to go up this round.
Not this round, given that this is the last match that we have. But we had so many dragons in the first round of draft that I feel like we're still doing okay.
We're still doing okay.
And you have looked at the decks that are being played in Standard. There are some dragons lurking in the Nar Hills.
Yeah, we showed my top 20 piece I recorded yesterday over lunch, and I think I underrated Dragon Lord Tarkir.
Dragon Lord Atarka, not necessarily quick to come into play, but quick to end games once it's in play. The virtual sort of plague wind effect often on some boards, teamed up with an 8/8 trampler in the air. There's really not too much that stands in its way.
I was talking to the dealer that's on site, and it sounds like the red-green cards, in particular Dragon Lord Atarka, were the things that were selling the most. He was selling the most of.
Interesting stuff, yeah. The Mythic Rare, I mean, certainly all the Dragon Lords powerful, but some of them have more immediate homes than others, and Dragon Lord Atarka seems to be a good one. But the players drawing their opening 7 here. We've seen some mulligans be telling for both of these decks in past rounds. Are they going to be able to keep full 7 cards here? A little wince
does
there
not look
from
happy,
Ivan.
yeah.
I mean, Shi Tian looking in intense thought when he sees an opening hand is not unusual. But ultimately, this is the sort of deck where that thought bears fruit. You do need to plan out quite a few things to get all of the pieces together. And it looks like Ivan is going back for 6 cards.
But Lee keeps.
Now, if you're Ivan Floch playing against this deck, what are the key things that you're looking for in an opening hand?
I Thoughtseize is the best card. I mean, you definitely, hands with Thoughtseize, you can keep a lot sketchier than hands without Thoughtseize. You also, I do think, need to be able to apply pressure relatively soon. Like, you can't afford to have a hand that's all reactive. Because Shi Tian, if you just give him time, he'll stitch it together, even if you're able to Thoughtseize away a piece of the combo early on.
Yeah, I mean, Tarkir ended up to be just a great card for him because...
Right. Now, I mean, it wasn't blisteringly fast. It felt like he still needed Shi Tian to essentially whiff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he took away the Commune of the Gods, so it's like, okay, first you have to find an Ascendancy. Lee did manage to eventually find that Ascendancy, but he only had sort of a couple of loots with it. And when he failed to find Retraction Helix, Tarkir got there for 20.
And Shi Tian here just sort of looking around. He's got an awful lot of friends at this tournament. We saw him do the little thumbs up, thumbs down to someone just outside the feature match area to find out how his various compatriots are doing. And he's really been an incredible breakout player over just the last few years. That when you consider the number of years he's been playing versus his results, he's just been on an absolutely phenomenal run in the last couple of years.
Yeah, his percentage of Pro Tours top 8'd is among the best in the game at this point.
And tri-lands for both players to start off with.
Shi Tian's hand looks pretty reasonable. A Voyaging Satyr, Retraction Helix, Dragon Mantle. So basically just needs the Ascendancy before he can go for it. Although, of course, he'd prefer to find a Caryatid instead of the Satyr so that he's not vulnerable to removal spells.
And lo and behold, ask and thou shalt receive. It looks like the card drawn for Shi Tian this turn, just updated in our hand viewer, is that Sylvan Caryatid. So I'm guessing that that's going to be the one to come down here. Really no reason not to. You'd much rather have it in play than potentially sniped by a Thoughtseize. So the pieces of the puzzle kind of coming together for Shi Tian here. And we're going to start of a look at cards in Ivan Floch's hand soon enough. I mean, ultimately, he just needs to get something going here. And that something is a Sylvan Caryatid of his own. He's not willing to let Shi Tian get an advantage on mana on him.
Wow. I mean, there's not a whole lot else his deck does for 2. Getting Sidisi would be nice. I don't know that... Is that all the cards he's got? Should have more than that. Maybe there's a couple lands in that hand.
And Shi Tian here immediately powering out that Dragon Mantle just to draw a card. I say just, that's exactly what he wants to be doing at this stage of the game.
No, he needs an Ascendancy. That's the only missing piece at this point. I mean, certainly between the Caryatid and the Voyaging Satyr, he can generate all the mana he needs to keep cycling through his deck. Looting, it's just... He's got the Retraction Helix in hand for now. He needs to find a Jeskai Ascendancy.
I mean, ultimately, I feel like it's almost like a Schrodinger's cat kind of deck. Is it alive or dead? Does it have an Ascendancy? Does it not? And if it has one, it's almost certainly alive and almost certainly winning. If it doesn't have one, sooner or later, it's going to be dead.
Thoughtseize for Ivan Floch, though, can take away Retraction Helix and put Shi Tian 2 pieces away.
Yeah, without the Retraction Helix, things get a lot trickier for Shi Tian in terms of going off, at least in big fashion. He can certainly draw an awful lot of cards once he gets going, though.
Right, and Ascendancy can often find the Retraction Helix. You just don't actually go infinite until you have it.
So Ivan Floch here carefully figuring out exactly what he wants to do. I guess that timing on a Thoughtseize at this point is really hard because he knows that if there was going to be an Ascendancy, it kind of already would have happened.
Well, I know. I think his fear is Ascendancy wouldn't necessarily have happened. Ascendancy next turn is potentially lethal. But what Ivan Floch's curve wants to do is to play Sidisi. And so he decides he's got to get his beat down on. If he's not going to be playing out Sidisis and making zombies, he's going to be giving Shi Tian so many turns that it wouldn't even help him to Thoughtseize away a piece. So he's essentially said, look, if you got it, you got it. You may be able to just untap and kill me here, but if I Thoughtseize, all I'm doing is not losing. Thoughtseizing you now doesn't win me the game. It just means I won't die next turn. Shi Tian, you see him, he does the slow roll of himself because he knew Ascendancy there would have gotten the job done. Would have just been the game.
Yes, the DC Brood Tyrant, yes, it managed to get a creature into the graveyard and get a zombie token alongside, but at the same time, it's left all the shields down effectively for Ivan Floch here.
Right. Yeah, and Ivan knew that. That's why you saw him agonize over how to play that turn.
Yeah, quite an emotive player while he's making decisions. Doesn't necessarily mind his opponent knowing that he's really thinking hard. Doesn't necessarily give away too much about whether or not he's happy about his decisions, but you know he's thinking about them.
Bunch of land for Shi Tian. His hand's not particularly good. I mean, he's got the Retraction Helix, so he's 1 card away. But the rest of his hand doesn't do anything. And there's the Thoughtseize.
So now Ivan Floch's going to get a chance to find out what he's working with.
Shi Tian is going to cast Retraction Helix as a response just because now the Thoughtseize is a miss.
Yeah.
This will allow him to bounce the Dragon Mantle after Thoughtseize resolves and get at least a card draw. We see him smile about it. Yeah. Swing and a miss. Your Thoughtseize clearly did nothing here.
Little sad face from Ivan Floch there as he pays 2 life to achieve
Well,
certainly not nothing, because it does make life harder for Ivan Floch.
Oh, he mission was accomplished for Ivan. He's miming a little bit. Getting the Retraction Helix into the graveyard instead of Shi Tian's hand was absolutely mission accomplished.
And a Satyr Wayfinder here for Ivan Floch could be quite good, because Sidisi Brood Tyrant, it doesn't mind how creatures end up in the graveyard straight from your deck.
Right.
If they do, you get a zombie token.
Right. And the clock's going to start to add up. It's already going to be 5 power attacking this turn. Does hit a creature.
Hits a couple of creatures there. He will get a land back from those 4 cards. There we go. Llanowar Wastes. Oh, sorry, Temple of Malady. And with that, a Scry set up his next draw.
Yeah, this is how the game's supposed to go for Ivan Floch. You saw him agonize over tapping out for Sidisi. He knew that he was vulnerable on that turn, and that he might be kicking himself for not firing off a Thoughtseize, but he knew he had to get the beatdown started. Oh, hilarious! The zombie is held off by the fire-breathing Caryatid. Caryatid could get 2 pumps and actually eat a zombie, so Ivan has to leave it at home. That's hilarious.
Those fire-breathing trees, you got to watch out for them. Does Dragon Mantle count for our Dragon count?
I don't think so. I'm not buying it.
It seems like a stretch. I mean, we were having the
We're
conversation.
not counting Dragon Fodder either.
Ugin the Spirit Dragon, I'm willing to give a pass.
Ugin's a dragon. And Sarkhan, if Sarkhan makes a dragon or turns into a dragon, then he counts. But only if he either makes or turns into a dragon.
Yeah, just the Dragon Mantle, not enough. You need all of the dragon bits and pieces.
Dragon Fodder, also not enough.
I feel like each of these players taking it in turns to look very worried as their opponents consider things.
Yeah, Floch's got to feel like he's in great shape, though. He knows that his opponent needs 2 parts from here, and he's attacking for enough that Shi Tian's number of draw phases is pretty small. Does he get 1 or 2 from here? It's not 3.
Yeah, that 16 life not going to last too long if Ivan Floch decides that he wants to be aggressive here.
Drew another Thoughtseize, too. Let's check. How'd you do last turn? You get 2 draw phases. The Dragon Mantle card and the regular card. What'd you come up with?
Altar of the Brood there. That one going away. Altar of the Brood, one of the various ways that this deck can actually win.
Yeah.
It, in some respects, is a very clean win. It means that you get to deck your opponent, potentially, if they let you, see their entire deck. But you don't necessarily need to go to the attack step, even if the board is looking very, very busy. I mean, in this exact circumstance, if Shi Tian went off and made big attackers, Ivan Floch has an awful lot of blockers, making enough blockers to deal with everything.
Wow. Bile-Blight my own Sylvan Caryatid. That'll kill all the Sylvan Caryatids on the board, including the one Shi Tian has. That's about the only way in the format to kill Sylvan Caryatid.
Very cool play there for Ivan Floch, and that enough to get the win.
Absolutely. Cleared a path. Shi Tian now is 3 pieces away and taking a million, so he knew he was dead. He just extended the hand.
Yeah, not something that you see come up very often, but every time it does, a way of getting around hexproof by saying, well, I can target mine, and Bile-Blight doesn't really mind if it does that damage, or sorry, if it gives -3/-3 to other Caryatids that you can't see, I suppose.
Cool play.
Absolutely.
That
Very, very happy with that.
Pretty good at Magic.
Turns out, yeah, you don't get one of those trophies for winning a Pro Tour without being pretty good at Magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, a big win for Ivan Floch there with a deck that wasn't necessarily as influenced by Dragons of Tarkir as some of them that we've seen, at least through looking at
he's
deck
got a
lists
couple
thus far.
Sidisi Undead Viziers. I mean, it looks pretty close to the deck Reed Duke used to almost win the Star City Invitational a couple of weeks ago.
But certainly a deck with pedigree, and when it found itself up against another pedgree deck in the Jeskai Ascendancy deck, it was able to pull out that win there. So
you know who else that's a big win for? It's a big win for Eric Froelich and Owen Turtenwald and everybody who's chasing Shi Tian in the Player of the Year race right now. Ari Lax is off somewhere cheering.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember this, the 3rd Pro Tour of the season. It is now time that players can start thinking about that Player of the Year title.
Definitely.
And of course, with it, inevitably, the Player of the Year is also the national champion for team slot, but there's the World Championship to think about as well. There's an awful lot of different things to be chasing for, and yeah, they'll be super happy with that. But it sounds like there is a chance to speak directly to Ivan Floch about how that game went. Let's head down to the feature match area.
Hello there, Marshall Sutcliffe down here in the feature match area. I've got Ivan Floch with me. Ivan, you're 4-0 to start the tournament, 3-0 the draft. Talk us through a little bit about how that match went against Shi Tian.
Well, obviously I got lucky at the end. He got flatted a little bit, that helped me. But I guess I need that to win this matchup because I don't think it's a good matchup. I have a lot of expensive creatures and just cards that are not very relevant against him. So it was lucky and I'm happy about it.
How often do you kill your own Sylvan Caryatid just to take out theirs?
I guess that doesn't happen very often. In this matchup, it's very relevant. It comes up a lot, though.
Did you think that was going to happen from pretty early? I saw that you had the Bile-Blight in your hand.
That is the only reason why you can kill other creatures Bile-Blight, but Bile-Blight is the only removal who can kill Caryatid. So that's the thing. He plays his enchantment targeting Caryatid if he has it. He's one.
Now, what about the deck choice that you made here? It looks like you're on Sultai with a bunch of Sidisi, whips, and stuff like that. What made you decide that deck?
Well, I guess I'm a control player in heart, and I tried everything slow that is out there, and I wasn't happy with standard control decks. I wasn't happy with Abzan control, so I guess this was the closest deck to good choice for control player, I guess.
I was going to say, when I first saw your hand, I saw some nice removal spells in black, some Thoughtseize. I thought, okay, yeah, it's Ivan, that's what he's playing. And then I saw Sidisi, and I was like, oh, he wants to change gears.
Yeah, I think this format is very aggressive. At least it is supposed to be. I don't know. I haven't seen what other players are doing, and I think standard blue-black control just wasn't doing it for me this time.
Okay, well, you're off to a great start here. Hopefully it keeps up for you, Ivan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for Ivan, I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. Send it back to the booth.
Thanks, Marshall. That the end there of our round 4. Congratulations to Ivan Floch. He's still on a perfect start, 4-0. I mean, that's what you want if you're in these things. You do need to get plenty more wins if you're going to get too far, but we're at the end of round 4 here. We're going to pass over to the news desk, and we'll see you in round 5.
Thanks so much to Tim Willoughby and Randy Buehler. They're bringing you the first of 10 rounds of Swiss standard action here. It's Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir. That means dragons, right? Well, that's why we had a dragon tracker to see how many dragons were in play on the battlefield on screen through the day. We saw tons in draft. It was 5, 2, 7, 9. We're up to 14 coming into constructed. What do we have? Oh, it's still 14. And that's, of course, because the matchup we spent most time on there was Ivan Floch against Shi Tian, and they had nary a dragon between them. But that 14 is going to go rocketing up as the weekend goes on. I want to tell you about some hashtags that you should be using here at the Pro Tour. First of all, we have hashtag FantasyPT, FANTASYPT, FantasyPT. Give us your 3 players who you think could be raising the trophy on Sunday afternoon. You see at the bottom of your screen there, Fantasy PT. Well, now we're opening up our 2 constructed-themed Twitter handles. Hashtag top 5 cards. What 5 cards, it doesn't have to be from Dragons, just what do you think the top 5 cards of the weekend are going to be? I think some of the Dragons cards are going to be in there. I know they're certainly in some of my top 5 cards. And as the weekend goes on, that'll come into focus as well. But then it's not just about cards, it's about synergy. What happens when you put them all together, where you get hashtag best deck? What is going to be the standout constructed deck of this tournament? Will it be Shi Tian's Jeskai Ascendancy? Will it be a mid-range Sidisi Sultai? We'll see. Will it be Blazing Mono Red? Lots of aggro players pretty excited about their 1 and 2 drops. We'll see how the speed of the format develops. Just as a reference, round about 10% of the matches went to time in the first constructed round. Well, in between the rounds in constructed, we're going to mark your card. We're going to have a mix on day 1 of traditional deck techs with players coming in to talk through their decks. But we also want to look at some pillars of the format, cards and key archetypes that are going to be all around the Pro Tour and all around your next standard format tournament. So we're going to start now with one of those. Waiting patiently at the wall is Brian David Marshall and Ian Duke, and they are going to walk us through some of the options for Jeskai tokens.